Thank you, and as Todd said, where I'm going to start here is Daryl and Scott have given a feel for where prices are. I'm going to talk about cost for a little bit, and that's going to lead to incomes, and obviously incomes are going to be lower and maybe more lower than many are anticipating at this point in time, and then that leads to our responses, conserve cash now. So, starting out where Daryl left off, here are projections that we're going to use for 2014 and 2015. Corn at $3.60 for 14, $10 for soybeans, moving into 15, $4.20 and $9.75. $4.20 and $9.75, when we're projecting here for 2015, will be the prices that we'll be using. And actually, if you look at what those prices are, they're a bit more optimistic than a lot of people have been using for projections at this point in time. It's sort of interesting. You don't have to get down to $3 corn to have stress out here. So we can get plenty of stress in the $4 range. Those are the prices that we're going to use, and that then leads us to these projections of revenue. This is for Central Illinois, and the bars here are for 2000 through 2013 actual, then 2014 and 2015. The actual ones are from summarizing from FBFM, Illinois Farm Business Farm Management. We have crop revenue there, government payments in the red, and then the green bar is crop insurance payments. You can see there that as we all know, 2006, we reached a new higher plateau in revenue because of higher prices. And that revenue actually has been averaging something close to $9.80 in Central Illinois since 2006. 2011 and 2012 and 2013 are above that, and 2014 and 2015 are going to be below that. The 2014 forecast in there is that using that $3.60 price and a 220 bushel yield. So we're not, I don't know if 220 is going to be the actual yield, but we're above average in these projections. 2015, if you're looking at that, the 2015 yield is being projected with a 200 bushel yield and a 420 price. Again, we're looking at revenue below where we have been in 2010, 11, and 12, 13. So revenue is going down. At the same time, we're projecting cost a bit down, but not as much. Again, this is for Central Illinois. These lines show non-land costs from 2000 to 2013. Those are actual numbers. Again, for Illinois FBFM farms, and then the 2014 and 2015 projections. As you all know, non-land cost went up tremendously from 2006 to 2013. And again, this is non-land cost, everything but cash rent. If your cash rent went up, we were looking at, in 2006, those costs totaling $320 per acre for corn. In 2013, we were right at $600. So almost doubling of cost in that period. So those costs have went up, and again, we're projecting some moderation in those costs in 2014 and 2015. To give you a feel for what we're projecting there as far as cost, we're going to divide out those costs into their components into a somewhat messy slide here. This shows components of those non-land costs, and they're arrayed in a specific way. They're arrayed in the items that increased the most between 2006 to 2013. So you'll see fertilizer at the top. It went up $111 from 2006 to 2013. Seed is next. Machinery depreciation and pesticide is fourth there. If you look at those four costs, they total of the increase something of $240 an acre, close to that, 313. So those four costs not only account for majority of the expenses, but they also accounted for the majority of the increase since 2006. So where those costs go has a pretty big bearing on whether we're projecting costs to go up or down. One other point here, we've heard that crude oil prices have been coming down, from over $100 a barrel to 50. That in and of itself isn't going to have a large impact on non-line costs, because if you look at that fuel and oil category, it's $24 an acre. Even if we half it, you're looking at $10, $12 an acre. That's significant and important, but it's not looking at all that large of an increase. And then one other category, and this is thank you to the lenders out there, interest costs are the only costs that have went down between 2006 through 2013. One note there, interest here is on non-land items. We break out farm mortgages, put that in a separate category, and these are non-land costs. Obviously, some of the reason why those are lower, actually, debt loads have increased, but interest rates are obviously very low right now. All right, as we look forward and look at cost, focusing on those first four, here's those costs with a bit more detail from 2000 to 2005 than 2013, 14, and 15 projected. As we're looking at those costs and whether they'll decrease, you can think of the input supply sector, think of the firms involved in that, machinery, fertilizer, pesticides, seed, and sort of rank them in terms of which are the most vulnerable to lower returns. Farmers are having lower returns. Which are the input suppliers that are going to be hit the hardest by that? And then likely be looking at at least lower returns, maybe lower prices. Clearly, the input supply sector that's going to be hit the hardest is farm machinery. And if you're looking at that machinery depreciation number, that went up because of large capital purchases. Moving forward, we're going to see probably some living off depreciation and lower farm machinery purchases. Maybe not prices, but purchases in the capital portion, and we've already seen reports of that. Farm machinery and equipment manufacturers reporting sales off 24% in 2014. The question is that big enough? The second category will likely be fertilizer, and you've got to divide the response of fertilizer into DAP, or phosphorus and potassium, versus nitrogen. And if you're looking at what farmers may do fertilizer-wise, phosphorus and potash, we're already hearing about cutting back in those areas. And maybe not a lot, but a 10% decline across many farmers is a big deal. And that would lead to reductions in demand and perhaps lower prices in the future. The other one that's sort of interesting is nitrogen. And if you look at nitrogen prices, they're higher now than they were last year. Fall applied nitrogen, at least those publicly reported sources, are higher this year than last year. Whether or not they'll come down is a good question. I wouldn't bet one way or the other for this year, but there are a number of factors that are going to squeeze nitrogen fertilizer. One of those is new capacity to produce fertilizers coming on. Again, we've seen plants being built, modernized. And the second one is that if we continue to see a switch from corn to soybeans, demand for nitrogen will decrease. I mean, soybeans don't use nitrogen. So both on the demand and supply side, there's going to be squeezes on that. And then the question of, will some of the larger manufacturers break and lower prices? And we will see. Could be like crude oil. When they begin coming down, they'll come down fast. Not predicting that, but that is the dynamic that is going on there in fertilizer. Pesticides, depends on the year. some of the optional fungicide, or what may be optional, will probably come under pressure. And then, of course, the interesting one is seed. The seed prices that I saw quoted in the press and that are public were not lower for 2015 crops versus 2014. We will see if there are some discounts being offered, and this does really come down to how farmers feel about and how much pressure they are willing to put on, and are they willing to back off the latest hybrids. And I understand latest hybrids have the highest yield potential. Can you really back off of that? So we're at sort of that situation in all these input suppliers. Farmers are looking at lower returns and how much pressure is going to be felt by those input suppliers. In any case, we are not, and I repeat, not projecting large non-line cost declines for 2015. It'll be interesting to see what this situation looks like if we continue to have $4 and lower, which we're not projecting, but if we have another year like this going into 2016. But we put non-line cost on there, added to that cash rents, and you can see 2014 and 2015, we're projecting returns for cash rent land, and these are at average cash rent levels. So this would be roughly $300 an acre for this quality land, to be higher than both revenue in 2014 and 2015. Again, this is average cash rents, and you're going to see here that we're going to project positive net incomes for 2014 and 2015. The reason for that is because most farms own some owned land, and most of that's owned with very little debt. So even 10% of owned land without a cash rent is a pretty good buffer. And obviously also share rents are involved in this, and share rents have come down. It's roughly 50-50 share rent, cash rented. Again, where those numbers lead, and this is just a slide, at the bottom there we're looking at operator and land returns. Operator and land returns gross revenue minus non-land cost. So that's what's left to pay the farmer and landowner. We saw those numbers above 500 in 2011 and 2012, 399 or 400 in 2013. In 2014 and 2015, we're projecting those at 254 and 227, in mid to low $200 range in 2014 and 2015. So again, considerably lower than in 2011, 2012, and 2013. That then leads to projections of incomes, and here this slide shows grain farm incomes on farms enrolled in FBFM from 1996 through 2013 are actual. And farm size changes every year, but just to give you a feel for what the average is, and the average, I mean, there are some over 5,000 acre farms in here and some obviously smaller farms. Average for this group is 1,350 acres, 55% corn, 42% soybeans, 2% wheat. This is all across Illinois, so it goes from northern Illinois to southern Illinois, and 15% owned, 42% share, and 43% cash rented. In 2013, the average for these farms was $128,000 per acre. 3 years before that, 2010, 2011, 2012, it was above 200,000. All right, and we hit our record year in 2012. Thank you to the drought. Incomes were high prices, low yields, plus crop insurance payments made for a good year in 2012. So we're looking at $128,000 in 2013. We're projecting something in the $60,000 to $70,000 range for 2014. And a lot of that's going to depend. Where that number's at is where you put ending inventory for the 2014 crop. being sold into 2015. So that number impacts the number every year. But we're looking at something in the $60,000 to $70,000 range, less than last year. And again, that puts us closer back into the 2000 to 2005, 2006 range of incomes. So if we move forward and project for 2015, it's below that. And again, that's using a 420 price and 200 bushel yield in those projections. We're using near average, trend average yields, which in this area of the world would be 200 bushel corn. So that's what will be used in those projections for this area. Obviously that varies. So we're looking at lower incomes. Nothing disastrous, but much lower. And at least much lower from 2010, 2011, and 2012, and 2013 for that matter. And then that results in some responses. And here you see those listed: corn versus soybeans, lower eliminate capital purchases, lower fertilizer and seed costs, and again, inputs are going to be, again, looked at hard, lower cash rent, and reduce other cash flows. I am going to go through those responses and look at each one of those, and starting first with corn versus soybeans, and then working our way down through the other four. This message probably is not for this area, but well, let's start back. 2014, my guess is if you look and break out your returns for 2014, soybeans are going to have higher returns than corn. Just where our yields are at, prices are at, soybeans are likely to have higher returns than corn. That's unusual. And if we look at prices for 2015, at least when we put these numbers in, it favored soybeans for 2015. This week, those things have been sort of correcting themselves. And 420 corn, 975 soybeans, if those actually did happen, and normal yields, this area would favor corn. Having said that, this area is one of the best areas for corn production, and we have much more of an advantage in corn production here than probably anywhere else. Maybe central Iowa has the same sort of thing. What's going to be interesting to look at this year is what happens to soybean acres, and do they go up relative to corn? And this likely is something for outside the center of the Corn Belt, and think about Ohio, Michigan, North Dakota, South Dakota, Mississippi. And if you begin looking at those areas where corn yields aren't as high as here and soybeans are pretty good, will they switch to more soybeans? Actually, you should probably be hoping for that. As they switch to soybeans, and if we do see a switch, that will, and that's sort of baked into that 420 corn and soybean projections that you saw in Daryl's graphs. But what acres look like is a big deal every year, and it will be again this year. So pay attention to that March 30th Planning Intention Report. Lower capital purchases. Here's what capital purchases have done between 2000 and 2013. So 2000 to 2005, capital purchases averaged between $40 and $50 per tillable acre. Capital purchases would include machinery, buildings, tile, anything of a longer-term nature. So this is longer-term nature. We've seen those average between $40 and $50 an acre. Past 3 years, they've been over $100 an acre. $120 an acre in 2013. So in that period, more than a doubling of those capital purchases. Capital purchases doubled during that peak period. Reasons for that are pretty obvious. We had high net incomes, cash flow, investing in the operations generally a good thing, so we did it. And then there's also always the tax implications of making investments in the business. And farmers hate to pay taxes. Who does? We used machinery, Section 179 expensing, and other fast depreciation methods to lower incomes in 2010, 2011, and 2012. All right, so we've reached 2013. Now we have lower incomes, and those costs or those purchases need to bend down. And in fact, if you look at 1980s, one of the things that happened during the 1980s was that incomes came down, but capital purchases and others lagged. So that is sort of the concern, that we have incomes coming down, but other cash flows don't adjust as quickly to those income declines. And you could be making the argument actually now that that happened already. You see that capital purchases continued to go up in 2013, and this is across Illinois. Now I'm going to superimpose on that graph what happened to net incomes per acre. And you can see here, the red bars are net incomes per acre. 2013, they came down. Machinery purchases, still in the blue, continued up. If you're looking at where net incomes are right now, we should be back in the $40 to $50 an acre range, which would imply more than a 50% drop in capital purchases. And that's a big number. And if the truth be known, it probably should be less than that, because we probably have the equipment necessary to go without capital purchases for several years. So response, that needs to bend down probably faster than it has, more than it already has. Fertilizer and seed, and then cash rents. Here's USDA average cash rents. Champaign County there is $253. That's a 2014 number for cash rents, and this is again was reported by USDA. They're going to skip a year and not report these for 2015, and we'll again report these for 2016. If we look at FBFM numbers or farm credit numbers on cash rents, they come out pretty close to these averages. So I do believe those are the averages, but obviously we can find cash rents from one parcel to the next that vary tremendously even within a county. I mean, and you know, 253 may be the average, but we can find $400 cash rents easily in a single county. So those vary, and just to give you a feel for that, this is back to 2013, and this compares. The first column there is what NASS rents imply, 313 for excellent productivity land, which would be farmland with yields, expected corn yields above 190 bushels per acre. Good, 170 to 190. Average, 150 to 170, and then fair, below 150. Excellent quality land, according to NASS, had a $313 per acre cash rent in 2013. If we look at what Illinois Society of Professional Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers said, it was $388 average, so that's $75 difference. So again, just illustrating that there are tremendous variabilities in cash rents out there. And by the way, I do believe that average cash rent's about right, and I do believe that professional managers is about right from what I've seen, which means that there's a lot of rents below that average as well. To get the average, you would have to have a lot of rents below that. And what we're likely seeing is that high end coming down. And just to give you a feel for that, this again is the Illinois Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. what they said rents were for 2014, what they expected the 2015 rent to be. And this was asked in a mid-year survey. The Illinois Society does a full-year survey, which will be released in March this year, and a mid-year survey, so that 2015 number is from August. And if anything, the prices were probably lower than now. But we see expected 2015 cash rents being lower than 2014, and you can see there from $40-ish lower. Again, what we're looking at here is rents coming down likely on the professionally managed farmland. And that likely will also translate to average cash rents coming down, but the question is that enough given returns in 2014 and 2015? Again, to give you a feel, this is just taking operator and land returns. We've seen this slide before. Corn, soybeans, and then corn versus soybeans. So that last column there, corn is at $248 per acre. Operator and land return left to split between the landlord and tenant. 186 for soybeans, average 2/3, 1/3, 227. Our rents average close to $300. That would be a negative $69 return for 2015. Again, looking at losses at those average levels for 2015. Prices now, and this is the issue, is that we're going to have and are going to continue to see great variations in prices across years. And we saw in 2010, 2011, and 2012 higher prices. Now we're looking at lower prices, and if you look at those prices, they come up with very different return levels. And a $300 cash rent in 2010, 2011, and 2012 left a lot of income for farmers those years, and now it doesn't leave much income. But just to give you a feel, if we use $4 corn, $10 soybeans for 2015, we come up with the operator and land return of $206 an acre. If we use the long run prices, which were implied by Scott earlier today, 460 and 11, we're at 303. And higher prices, 540 and 1220, which is back sort of in that 2010 through 12 period, 431. And by the way, I would bet during the next 5 years we'll see $5 corn sometime during it. I mean, if we believe that that our long run price, according to Scott, is 460. We're going to have periods where we're below it, periods above it. 5 obviously is above it, but there you can see those differences in returns. $206 an acre, 431, $200+ an acre difference. And that's where we're at. And setting a cash rent in that environment that's going to last for a couple years is going to be extremely difficult. If you set it for the long run average, you're going to be in the 250 range, in which case those high prices, if you're trying to set a cash rent, some years the farmer makes money, sometimes they lose it. And the question is how much does the landowner want to share in those variability? If they don't want to share in the variability, those rents have to be pretty low. And that also suggests that share rents, variable cash rents, and those sorts of things are good in this sort of environment. Again, looking at those prices, that's a pretty good indication of what has happened in the past 5 years. And likely is a pretty good look at what will happen in the next 5 years. So we're in this era where price swings will make $200 difference in returns across a year, and it's difficult to set cash rent in that environment. Other cash flows. This is what's happened to family living on grain farms. Something in the $80 to $90 an acre range in 2004, 2005, and 2006, and it's increased. And again, if you're looking at where farm returns are at, that also has to bend backwards. So, where we're at lower incomes for 2014 and 2015. If anything, and you can put your spin on it any way you want to. Personally, I don't think this is the 1980s. I think we're going back to the early 2000s, where returns are tight and every cash flow on a farm has to be evaluated, and the low-cost producer wins in the long run. So we're back to normal. 2010, 2011, 2012 will likely be looked back in 50 years as our golden age in agriculture, comparable to the 70s, 50s, and 1911s. I don't know about that. I wasn't around that, but that's what people say. And then that will lead to those responses, and again, looking at those acres and keeping cost in control.